Have you ever seen a submerged aquatic weed named Eurasian Milfoil? Have you ever witnessed what devastation it can bring to a waterway? Let's introduce and describe this invasive weed, and following that, I'm going to ask you for your help in combating its growth and spread in the Schroon Lake and River. Some key points to remember while providing your help. Obey all boating laws. It is important that you not attempt to hand harvest milfoil yourself. There are specific procedures to prevent milfoil fragments from being lost and rerouting. Your efforts are important and can make a real difference. Report all suspect plants. If you do not find any suspect plants, report that also. This will help us track where the plants are and where they are not. Above all, use common sense to prevent injury while performing the surveillance. Eurasian milfoil is shown here. To simplify this presentation, we will refer to it as the weed. The weed is native to Europe, Asia, and North Africa. It was introduced in the Chesapeake Bay area in the late 19th century. Here it is in the water. Once it reaches the surface, it tends to float horizontally. Notice the flowers on the tip which form a spike that emerges from the water surface. And here it is out of the water. Notice how the leaves collapse when it's held in this orientation. Here you get a sense of the scale when compared to a penny. And here is another comparison with a ruler. And finally, a view in black and white. The weed is spread primarily by fragmented stems which regenerate the plant. The plant fragments can be mechanically spread by waterways, animals, and motorboats. We should point out the boats can spread the weeds within a body of water and from one body to another pretty efficiently. It is for this reason we introduced a boater awareness program in 2007 using over 50 volunteers. This program informed boaters about how the weed hitchhikes to new locations by attaching to their boats. You can see that pretty clearly in this photo. We instructed boaters how to remove it and dispose of it safely. Here is a sticker we asked them to attach to their trailer to increase awareness and remind them on how to handle this hitchhiker. The weed prefers still, shallow water, about 4 to 12 feet deep, and muddy shores, but it can grow in a range of sediment types. It requires lots of sunlight, so you generally won't find it in depths beyond 16 feet. It can survive under ice cover. The weed locations, shown on this map by the red dots, have expanded throughout northeastern New York. Our lake, shown by the arrow, and many other neighboring lakes have been invaded. Schroon Lake currently has many identified sites, as shown on this map. The problem with this weed is it produces a dense canopy in the water. Let's demonstrate with progressive views of Lake Bomoseen in Vermont. This is stage 1 with the weed beginning to get a foothold. This is stage 2 with weeds still below surface but spreading. In stage 3, there's a very dense underwater growth with many plants breaking through the surface. Here, in the 4th stage, the weed bed has penetrated the surface considerably and laid down a thick surface canopy. This canopy of weeds suppresses native plants and reduces native plants used by waterfowl. It interferes with navigation and recreation. I'm sure you can see why swimming and boating in that tangled mess would be a problem. The weed clogs water intakes and provides breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Saratoga Lake is overrun with it. Eagle Lake is 30% covered by it. Lake George has a massive program to arrest its growth, as does Upper Saranac Lake. Our neighbors on Loon Lake and Brant Lake also have their hands full. Let us give you a close-up look at this weed so when we ask for your help later, you'll have some idea what we're looking for. The stems are long and stringy and branch near the surface. They have leaves arranged in circles, called whorls, around the stem. Typically, 3 to 5 leaves at each juncture. This is not a typical leaf like a maple. It's feathery with needle-like finger pairs of 12 to 20 forming each leaf. The leaves of the plant are basically a uniform dark green, but the color of the stem can vary from whitish pink to reddish brown. The growing tips are tassel-like and have a reddish tint. During late summer, tiny pink flowers may occur on red emergent spikes that stand several inches above the water surface. Telltale clues when looking into the water at the plant is its filmy appearance and almost rhythmic motion when disturbed by current. Also, the tip of the leaf is blunt as though someone cut across it with a scissor. Please remember that there are many native plants and even native milfoils that look similar. It will be important to confirm identification of suspect plants before beginning any controls. What is presently being done to stop the spread of the weed? The town of Schroon, under the guidance of the Schroon Lake Association, have contracted, secured grants, and established a lake manager function with Steve Lemire of Adirondack Ecologists. East Shore Schroon Lake Association has contributed funds to this effort. In addition to water quality testing, Steve and his dive team provide surveillance, looking for the weeds, detection, finding and marking the weed's location, and removal, extracting weeds by its roots. This process is carried out by divers, as shown here, and is referred to as hand harvesting. It is challenging, laborious, and expensive. It has been successful in slowing the propagation of the weed, but new sites have been found. With limited funds and resources, and many miles of irregular shoreline, the task is daunting. We are concerned about controlling new areas of growth and stopping the spread. It is this resource dilemma that begs the question, how can we use our shoreline residents in this surveillance activity so that the hand harvesting team can quickly find the weed's location and focus on removing it? How can shoreline users help? The Scout Program. In discussions with leaders at our neighboring Loon Lake, we found out they were using shoreline owners to scout their respective shorelines for locating, marking, and notifying others regarding milfoil plants. In addition, we observed our lake manager, Steve, doing his work and marking the weed locations with a simple homemade device as shown here. Note the 2 Coke bottles tied together with a 12 to 15-foot nylon string. You can see one of the bottles is filled with sand and stones, and this acts as the anchor. The other bottle is left empty so it can float. Both bottles are capped. We tried this device in the lake and left it out for a week in high winds and high wave activity. The float didn't move from its original position by more than a foot. From these discussions, observations, and tests, we concluded if we put a Scout program in place and use this simple device and receive the support of the more than 650 shoreline property owners, we could make a huge impact battling this weed. Picture this. A drive crew focuses on the tough work of hand harvesting without the time-consuming interruption of surveillance work. Our shoreline volunteers, once per year, or possibly twice, ventures out into their water frontage to a depth they can handle and look for any suspect plants. They call a preset number with info on the potential discovery which they have marked with a float. A team member shows up for plant verification. If it's the weed, he GPSes the location for recording purposes and contacts the lake manager for removal. A pretty efficient surveillance and removal program, wouldn't you say? Especially if we get a large number of you to be the eyes of the program. More detail on the how of this program with some tips now follow. How do I sign up? We have forms here for your sign up. Your agreement to help, your name, address, phone, and email are requested. We will review this form in detail a little later. We want you to understand the release of all claims and the waiver sections before you sign off. The surveillance months are shown here. The number to call if you find a suspect plant or if you do not find any is on the handout you will receive. Reporting a suspect plant gets an expert team member to your place to verify, locate with GPS coordinates, and initiate removal procedures. The reason we don't want you to pull it out is to prevent fragments from breaking loose and rerouting. This photo clearly demonstrates the rerouting capability of the weed. A fragment of the weed was removed from our lake and placed into the container shown. Sand was placed in the container to make it a more realistic visual training device. After 1 month, the weed fragment sprouted roots which can clearly be seen as they try to gain a foothold in the sandy bottom. It is for this reason we want an expert diver to remove the plant by scooping the entire root system out of the bottom. The plant will be carefully bagged to avoid fragment spread and transported to a safe location. If it's something other than the invasive weed we are looking for, like a native look-alike, shown here, the team member will point that out so that you can get more savvy with each surveillance. If you find nothing, we would also like to know that, so we can indicate that fact on a master map and keep track of what the weed is doing or not doing for future planning.